I recently made the switch to Anchor podcasting for my podcast hosting. And if you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free, first and foremost. There are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or your computer, which makes it super easy. Anchor will also distribute your podcast for you, so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. Really cool point. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's literally everything you need to make a podcast all in one place. So download the free Anchor app now or go to anchor.fm to get started.
You're listening to Simply the Best Sports Take, the best podcast breaking down the best stuff in sports with host Sean Bingham. His takes are so good, he dropped the mic, but then you wouldn't be able to hear him, and that would suck.
Welcome into Simply the Best Sports Podcast. I am your host, Sean Bingham, and today we're going to go ahead and make it an extension of Kobe Bryant Day. Kobe's jerseys, yes, plural, numbers 8 and number 8 and number 24, both retired last night at Staples Center in Los Angeles. Pretty awesome moment, pretty cool basketball moment. You could see all of the basketball greats on social media congratulating him. Many of them were there in attendance, and it was a really, really special and just kind of a fun night. Game went to overtime, by the way, the Warriors and the Lakers. Kevin Durant got dunked on 3 times, but in the end he hit the game winner, and Lonzo got blocked on what would have been the game winner for the Lakers. But in overtime, the Warriors get the victory. Kobe Bryant, by the way, left early from the game. He left at the end of regulation, which I thought was kind of funny. It's a night that they're honoring him, and he took off with the tie game going to overtime. But anyway, so the question has been, which Kobe Bryant was better? Number 8 or number 24? The other question has been, is he the greatest Laker ever? Where does he stack up with the all-time greats? Well, I'm going to answer those questions for you. The better Kobe Bryant, in my opinion, is probably just barely number 24. And the reason being that he was just a little bit more mature. Actually, he was a lot bit more mature and only a little bit less athletic. The killer instinct really came in. Mamba really came in. He took over games more. He was no longer Robin in any way, shape, or form. He was very much Batman. Whereas at number 8, yeah, he was way more athletic. Well, not way more athletic, but he did more athletic things, more spectacular plays. But he was always Robin to Shaq's Batman. And when he went and got those 2 championships without Shaq, that really put Kobe Bryant on the map as truly one of the all-time greats, because he had already gotten 3 with Shaq, and he was very much like a strong number 2 on that team. And then he goes and gets 2 without Shaq, and Shaq only got 1 without him. And so that was a really big deal. So to me, the better of the 2 is probably number 24, but barely, because number 8 was phenomenal, won 3 championships, was a scoring machine, athletic plays that like the league's never really seen before. So I would barely give the edge to number 24. Okay, so now the question I really want to talk about, is he the greatest Laker ever? Everybody's kind of prisoners of the moment. It's so cool, like Kobe Bryant's so amazing, and he is. But is he the greatest Laker ever? My honest opinion is that he is not. He in the mix. The only people to me that can be in the conversation, well, I guess there's a few, but the ones I want to focus on, Jerry West is one that's kind of like a runner-up. Okay, he doesn't quite make the conversation, but he's like right on the outside looking in. Same with Wilt Chamberlain, only because he didn't play for the Lakers for enough time. So the guys that really you need to focus on are Shaq, Kareem, and Magic. And then Kobe, of course, number 4. So to me, those 4 are the ones to talk about. Shaq probably doesn't win it only because he played for so many different teams. His most dominating stretch was clearly when he was a Laker. And he had maybe the most dominant stretch of any Laker ever The three-peat was largely due to Shaq. Kobe, of course, was a huge part of it as well, but Shaq was the Finals MVP of all three of those. Shaq was absolutely just dominating the league during his years as a Laker. But he played for the Magic early in his career for 4 years. Then he bounced and went to the Heat after the Lakers, and he played for the Celtics and the Cavs and who knows who else. And so because his career with the Lakers was a little bit shorter, and he never was like a first team all defense kind of guy. Shaq wasn't. And so to me, Shaq barely is going to have to get bumped off the list. So then it comes down to Kareem, Magic, and Kobe. Excuse me. To me, those are clearly the top three best Lakers of all time. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Magic Johnson, and Kobe Bryant. So let's really, really think about this clearly and not just be prisoners of the moment and be all like, oh, Kobe Bryant's the greatest ever. Let's really think about it and decide who is. So you look at what they accomplished in their careers. Obviously, Magic and Kobe only played for the Lakers. Kareem played for the Bucks for several years. He actually won his first championship with the Bucks in Milwaukee. And he won 3 of his 6 league MVPs in Milwaukee. So while Kareem played most of his career with Los Angeles and won 5 titles with Los Angeles, he was only the Finals MVP of 1 of those, meaning on the other 4, he wasn't really even the best player on his team at the time. Kareem never led the league in scoring as a Laker. He did so twice as a Buck. So he did win 3 league MVPs with the Lakers. He did win 5 championships with the Lakers, one of which he was the Finals MVP. He was an All-Star pretty much every year. He was first-team All-NBA, I believe 6 times as a Laker. He was first-team All-Defense 3 times as a Laker. So he's right there. But to me, he probably, if we're looking at only your Laker tenure, to me, Kareem probably comes in third. So now it comes down to Magic and Kobe. And to me, the greatest Laker of all time is Magic Johnson. And Kobe would be second. Magic Johnson won as many championships as Kobe did, 5. He was Finals MVP of more of those than Kobe was. He was Finals MVP 3 times. Kobe was Finals MVP twice. He was League MVP 3 times. Kobe was only League MVP once. So if you think about it, if Magic hadn't contracted HIV, if he hadn't had that kind of awful illness that somehow he's miraculously still beating, it seems like. But if that hadn't happened to him back in the early 90s, he had 3 or 4 more prime-like seasons left in him. And then I think there's no question we'd be saying he's the greatest Laker of all time. But because his career was cut short, he did come back for a brief time, like 5 years later, but he was a shell of himself. But anyway, if his career hadn't been cut short, I don't think there's any question people would be saying he's the greatest Laker of all time. Because he only had 13 seasons that he played, really only 12. But the guy won 5 championships in those 12 years. 5 in those 12 years that he played for the Lakers. And then the 13th was also with the Lakers, but it was later, it was 5 years after he'd retired for it because of HIV. 3 MVPs, 3 Finals MVPs, led the league in steals 4 times, led the league in assists 4 times, led the league in steals twice. To me, I'm going to put, he averaged for his career 19.5 points and 11.2 assists and 7.2 rebounds and 1.9 steals. And he shot 52% from the field, 85% from the free throw line. To me, Magic Johnson is the greatest Laker of all time. Those numbers all increase just slightly in the playoffs, by the way, for Magic Johnson. To me, he slightly edges out Kobe Bryant. He does. He slightly edges him out. Kobe's career field goal percentage is 45%. Not that. It's actually 44.8. Really not that good. 25 points, 4.7 assists, 5.3 rebounds. Kobe, however, was Finals MVP twice. He won one MVP. He was first team All-Defense 9 times. Now, that's very impressive. That's something Magic Johnson actually never accomplished. But if you just are looking at like what they did for the franchise, to me, it's Magic Johnson just ever so slightly edging out Kobe Bryant, and Kobe Bryant coming in at number 2 on the all-time Laker list, which is by far the most prestigious list of any team to be on. Celtics would probably be number 2 because there's a lot of history there. But to me, Kobe Bryant comes in second to Magic Johnson. Now, to the question of where does he stand on the all-time list regardless of what team you played for? Where does he stack up against Kareem and Shaq now if you consider all their things? To me, he'd absolutely be behind Kareem. And I'm torn on the Shaq one. I'm torn. They're kind of right there in the mix. But guys that are definitely better are Michael Jordan, Magic Johnson, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, LeBron James. Those 4 for sure have solidified their spots above the rest. After that, you get guys like Kobe Bryant, Shaquille O'Neal, Larry Bird, maybe even an Elgin Baylor, Tim Duncan. Wilt, to me, is in that list, kind of just behind those top 4 guys. And so I would say Kobe Bryant is a top 10 player of all time. Second greatest shooting guard of all time, behind only Michael Jordan, who is the greatest player of all time. And as far as his clutch factor goes, Kobe is clutch. And you know how much I'm big on that. Kobe actually, during his career, during the 20 years that he played, he had the most of any other player game-tying or game-winning shots in the last 10 seconds of the fourth quarter or overtime. So he led the league during that span in that category, which I love that kind of statistic because he had that killer. He just had this it factor. Yeah, he only shot 44.8% from the field for his career, which really isn't very impressive. But he had that killer instinct. He had that clutch factor. He had that I'm going to do whatever it takes to win gene inside of him, that mean streak. And it's something that LeBron James is missing. And if LeBron James had it at the level that Michael Jordan or even Kobe Bryant had it, he probably would be the greatest player of all time. But because he lacks it so thoroughly, to me, LeBron ends up somewhere around 4th greatest of all time. So Kobe Bryant, to me, top 10 player of all time. The older he got, the more I liked him. I don't think he's the greatest Laker ever. I think that's Magic Johnson. I think Kobe Bryant is second. And I think I'd put Kareem and Shaq. I'd probably put Shaq third and Kareem 4th on the all-time Laker list. That would be my top 4 in order: Magic, Kobe, Shaq, Kareem. And I'd put all of them in the top 10 of all time, which is a huge, huge testament to how good that Lakers franchise is. But the clutch factor, Kobe Bryant, the older he got, man, the more I liked him. Because when he was young, he was kind of a punk. He was arrogant. He was cocky. He was copying Michael Jordan on everything. And I just, for whatever reason, I just didn't really love him. But the older he got, the more mature he got, the more I liked him. And the more I see him interviewed, the more I like him. I have the utmost respect for Kobe Bryant as a basketball player. Like, his competitive fire is something that you absolutely positively have to admire and respect because he wants to win so badly. And that will to win, that drive to win, to me, is what pushed him to be as good as he was and what pushed him into the top echelon of greatest players of all time. One of the greatest of all time, one of the greatest Lakers of all time, amazing career. I just didn't want to be a prisoner of the moment and say for sure he was the greatest Laker of all time until I really thought about it, dissected it, took a minute to think it all over, look it all over, and to me he comes in number 2. But when you look at that lineup, that's pretty darn impressive. That's all the time I have for today. Follow me on Twitter at Sean Bingham, and I will catch you mañana. I'm out. Peace.
Thanks for hanging with Simply the Best Sports Take. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast and check out stbsportstake.com. Simply the best in sports.